Welcome back to another starter pack. I love doing these as it really gives me a chance to really dive into a specific subgenre of progressive rock. We all know that progressive rock has a lot of facets to it, and this time we're looking at the subgenre that I have dubbed like brutal progressive metal. Now these were the albums and artists that I didn't cover in the metal progressive rock starter pack. A lot of people were like, well, why didn't you talk about these guys? Unlike just regular metal, as the name states, it's very brutal, it's very bombastic, it's very in your face. Like the vocalizations employ more of screams, growls, same with a drumming style that is very relentless. The guitars are either tuned down or out of tune when they're playing it. They're usually playing in a lower key as well. And with all these starter packs, I'm going to give you the required listenings and then a recommended listening. I'm going to do this one a little bit different. I'm going to pair each required listen artist with a recommended artist that's very similar to that, instead of doing all the required ones at the beginning and then having a handful of recommended ones at the end. And so this way it'll help balance it out a little bit and give you more of a, if you like this, then check this out. And again, as always, this is my own personal starter pack. These are the bands and artists that I enjoy listening to. This isn't a comprehensive or cohesive starter pack. This is just the ones that I enjoy, and these were the ones that also helped me get into the genre as well. And so let's just dive right in, and first off, we do need to give a little bit of context to this subgenre as well. Like all genres of music, this one didn't come out of a vacuum. This one didn't come out of the void fully formed. There were other bands that helped shape and form it. I mean, we already have the progressive rock legends from the past, like King Crimson, Genesis, Gentle Giant. These guys really helped trailblaze what music could do, and I'm going to just assume right off the bat that you've already known these bands, you're already familiar with them. So I want to kind of take a look at some of those bands that really help shape and define what brutal metal was. And so this is even looking past like Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath and Uriah Heep. I want to take a look at those bands that really shaped it. And really, one band comes up among all the rest, and that is Meshuga. Again, not a big fan of Meshuga, but Meshuga came out at the right time with that really brutal presentation. Everything was percussive. The vocals, obviously the drumming and the rhythm, but also the guitar works. And the album that I would recommend you listen to as required listening is Obzen. This is the only album of theirs that I really can get into. Like, I've listened to a number of their albums, but this is the only one that I really can sink my teeth into, and it has a lot of their standout tracks, Bleed being their most obvious track of all. Let's dive a little bit deeper into more of the forefathers and trailblazers and masters of this genre, starting obviously with Opeth. They utilized a lot more of the classical techniques of bands such as Genesis, especially bands like Camel, blended that stylistics within a brutal approach. The album, obviously, that I have to say is the required listening is Blackwater Park. This album has been on so many top 10 lists of metal music, and whenever you ask an Opeth fan what is their favorite, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Blackwater Park. It's not my favorite, but it is the one that showcases what Opeth music really is about. Each album from Opeth is quite different, but I feel like Blackwater Park was the pinnacle of what it meant to be an Opeth album. Now, the recommended albums from them, I have to say, is Ghost Reservoirs, Damnation, as well as Pale Communion. Ghost Reservoirs I love just with how brutal it could be, with a little bit more of a symphonic approach to it. Damnation really shows what the band can do in a very somber and almost a dark approach. It doesn't have any of the growls, it doesn't have any of the brutality, but it still holds that darkness. And Pale Communion is honestly my favorite album by these guys. It's the most progressive. It's progressive in the fact of like traditional progressive rock from like the 70s. But it holds a lot of my favorite tracks as well. Now, the pairing artist that I'm going to say for this is Comarat. I recently discovered these guys last year, really fell in love with their works, really enjoyed their styles. So go and check them out. A lot of their albums are already on like Spotify and whatnot, so if you like Opeth, give these guys a try. These guys definitely are in the Candlelit era of Opeth, so if you're craving for that, because Opeth is at this point not going back to that, dive into these guys. So next up comes the next band that I really loved and really grabbed onto, and that is Between the Buried and Me. Between the Buried in Me is a little bit more optimistic, and it's probably because they play a lot of their songs in a major chord, and I love that. Tommy Rogers on the vocals is doing a lot of screaming and growling, and has that brutal approach. The one that's required, the one that you need to seek out and listen to, is Colors. This is probably their real masterpiece. It holds some of the most brutal work that they've presented, as well as the most complicated and progressive music that they have. The build-ups, the payoffs, the playing styles, the like soaring guitar work on this is just brilliant. They cover the full spectrum of emotions within this work, and it's the one that I praise the highest. Now, the recommended ones that I have to go for this are The Great Misdirect as well as The Parallax Part 2. Great Misdirect is probably their most progressive work in terms of, like, again, much like Opeth's Pale Communion, their most traditional proggy work from, like, emulating the sounds of the 70s. Whereas The Parallax Part 2 is their Goliath, their like giant soundscaping behemoth of an album. I mean, I'm still deconstructing it a number of years after its release. Now, the artist that I want to pair with this as the recommended one is the Faceless. These guys still blow me away. In Becoming a Ghost was one of my favorite albums from last year, but their autotheism soundscapes are just fantastic, and they utilize a lot of that same technique that Between the Buried and Me has. So if you like Between the Buried and Me, go check out the Faceless. The next band that I really got into was Mastodon. Mastodon holds less soaring soundscapes, less long and epic scales of songs, but probably presenting more of like that sludge metal. It's really taken me a longer time to get into Mastodon, but now that I've gotten into the water and really drank the Kool-Aid, I love them, and there's such a blending of different styles within it, but it keeps harkening back to that brutality. The one that I have to say is the required listen is obviously Crack the Sky. It's the most cohesive and whole sounding album. The soundscapes within the guitars is just brilliant, and later on in their careers with some of the recommended albums I'm going to be talking about, they provide more of a symphonic approach. Obviously, Emperor of Sand is a recommended one, as well as Leviathan. Leviathan, just with Blood and Thunder, a great soundscape, and it's a concept album of Moby Dick. What's not to love? Now, the similar artist and the pairing for the recommended one is Baroness. I've gotten into Baroness within the past couple of years, and each album is a different concept of a color. They have that same kind of style that Mastodon has. It provides a little bit of a more somber approach. Finally, the last one that I'm going to have as a required listen is Gorge Ora. Gorge Ora, out of all of the artists, is the one that I know least about, but one that I still love to listen to. Out of all of the bands that I've covered so far, these guys show that you don't have to be as fast-paced, as relentless to be brutal. These guys are a little bit more slower, but they still hold that brutality that really shapes this subgenre. As I said, this is the least well-known that I have, so I haven't actually heard their entire discography, but the required listen is Mars to Sirius. It has my favorite song from them, Whales. I love that song so much. Whenever it gets to that chorus, I can't help but headbang. The recommended one is also The Way of the Flesh. This guy holds some outstanding tracks and really unifies what it means to be Gorge Ora. Now, the one that I'll pair with this is probably the most removed out of all the pairings, and that is a local talent from Toronto of Protest the Hero. Protest the Hero is a Toronto-based tech metal band, but it's very relentless, very much in that brutal vein. The one that I have to say check out is Fortress from there. They're just running their 10th anniversary of that album. I'm going to be remiss if I don't at least touch upon a few other bands as a recommended one. The major one being Neo Obliviscaris. I've really fallen in love with these guys since the last year. Sentinel has just blew me away, so go and check that out. As well as the Devin Townsend. Any project from him. I know I already covered him in the traditional metal prog deconstruction. Anything from Ziltoid Project, a real great time, and one that I have to recommend checking out. So that's my basket, that's my recommended piece, that's my starter pack for you guys. Go and check them out. It will lead you to even more music as well. Let me know of other bands that you would include in this by commenting down below. I know and purposely left out a lot of those more technical prog metal bands such as Animals as Leaders, Tesseract. I wanted to leave those guys more for a technical prog metal starter pack that I'm going to be doing in the future. And those cover like more of the gent techniques. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.